All right, C2 redirectors. Okay, so basically the high level. We're going to start with why, and then we're going to get into the technical. So C2 redirectors. Primarily seen this with HTTP and HTTPS. Why would we do this? Well, we want to hide our C2 servers. From a business point of view, saves us time, energy, and money, right? So let's hop on over to just some paper, and we'll start drawing this out. Okay, cool. So here's the very basics of what this is going to look like. We have a C2, and we have two redirectors. Okay, basically this will be a front for HTTP. Well, if you could spell HTTPS. And C2 will tunnel into these. For our use case here, we're going to use SSH via port forwarding. So anyways, that's the basics. That's all we're going to worry about. There's a few books I want to bring up. This one, Red Team, right? This goes over interactive, short haul, long haul, different options, and things to think about. Next book, Red Team Tactics. There's a shit ton of cool technical information in this one. This one is more for management, and this one's more for techies, right? This one kind of goes over what I'm going to show you with the SSH port forwarding and then the HTTPS front end. Okay, cool. Where the hell's my pen? Okay. So we're going to hop on over here and get a little bit more in depth. So I guess from the book, right? 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and these are all redirectors, right? R1, R2, R1, R2. Okay. And basically what that's going to look like is you have a C2 here. C2 here and a C2 here. And again, same setup, right? The book goes into detail of what's going on here. But basically, this would be like your interactive. I'll just call it interactive. Anyways, this is the one that's sending commands like crazy. I guess I wouldn't say crazy because you don't want to get caught. But this is the one that's going to be more in-depth with your compromised host. This one's going to be short haul. This one's going to be phoning back. Your compromised host is going to be phoning back maybe, I don't know, once or twice a day, right? Not much. And then this one is your long haul. Oh, god damn it. Long haul. Yeah, these little buttons on here. Anyways, this is going to be your compromised host calling back every once in a great while. We're talking like once a week, once a month, depending on what your target is. Those get costly depending on how long you have to run them and where you're running them. If you're running in the cloud, certain providers, redirectors, C2, it gets expensive, okay? Especially depending on how long your campaign is. Management tends to avoid these. The short haul, meh, they're nice to have up and running. Interactive, that's mainly where we're going to be, especially if you run a hybrid of pen test and red teaming. Remember, those are two different things. However, having a C2 if you're a pen tester or red teamer, super important. You want one. So that's like the basics. Now, what I use is a hybrid because depending on how far along you are, you might be blowing past your blue team, the SOC, right? And you're going to be helping them out. Cost-wise, all that balanced out, turned out great. Basically what's happening is you have, let's say, I've only had to run like 2 redirectors. Sometimes you can have a third, but we're just going to label this R1, R2. And then here's what the C2s come in handy. Not every C2 is built the same, and they all have different functions. For instance, if we have a C2, let's say Powershell Empire, maybe Caldera. I'm not going to try to type that in there. And then maybe like Cobalt Strike. they all have very different functions. I mean, Cobalt Strike's like all over the place, but you get what I'm saying. It's nice to be able to drop these in. So back with the short interactive, short haul, long haul, you might have different domains. Well, you should have different domains. Same thing with your C2 redirectors for like the ones you plug and play. So basically what that looks like is it gets really gnarly real fast. So you have 1, 2, right? And then this one's going to be 1, 2, and 1, 2. As you can tell, it gets gnarly. But the beauty of this is you can infrastructure as code if you want, Docker containers for Nginx, whatever. For me, we're going to go over that later. We're going to use Rocky Linux, but Nginx has all these different configuration files you can create. Super important because then you can have your different domains like virtual hosts within Nginx, and they can monitor depending on how you're setting up. We'll go over that later. Anyways, what I'm getting at is plug and play is nice. So this seems to work out for us. It's cost effective, especially if you're on a low budget. I mean, if you have Cobalt Strike, that's awesome, but not everybody has that option. So, PowerShell Empire, Caldera, and there's a whole C2 matrix. I can add a link to it, but you can play around with them. But it's nice to have that plug and play option. All right, so now we'll get into the technical aspect here. Okay, so let's start with building our redirectors. Now, if you're using AWS, Azure, whatever, CloudWise, just spin up an AMI. You're good. If you are on-prem, which technically this lab is going to be, here we go. Basically, we're going to go to the C2 redirector repo. I've actually got the code right here, C2 redirectors, just under Rocky. Got the Anaconda file, right? The only thing you have to really change in here is going to be your password. So basically, you're just going to follow the README and update this line right there. I did keep it pretty generic to what AWS has as far as the Rocky user, so you don't. When we get to setup, you don't have to do much. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and hop on over here. And I mean, if you try to run this as regular user, you're going to get told no. Okay. All right, cool. So we're just going to label this as delete me 1. We'll do 15 gigs. I mean, that's pretty decent. All we're storing is configuration files. Virtual memory. If you plan on a lot of work, bump up your memory. For this lab, we're just going to do 4 gigs of RAM. CPU, 2 cores, and then I'm going to use my bridge. Cool. So this will kick this off, and basically the back end, what's going on here is we have that Anaconda file. You can generate your own if you want. There's a bunch of different options out there, like there's a Rocky repo with all of the different versions. What I did was I manually set up a Rocky VM at the end of the install, and everything's booted up. Just go under the root directory, there's an Anaconda file, you can copy that, use that. Yeah, so anyways, if we actually go into the code over here, I mean, the functions are straightforward. It just basically does a virt install, right? Just make sure your kickstart file lives here, and you don't have to worry about the ISO because we finally updated this to be HTTP install. Cool. So once that's done loading, we'll be back. Actually, one last thing I wanted to show you was these kickstart files. They're at the Rocky Linux GitLab. And if you look at main, there's no code here. You just have to go to the branch. So in this case, we're going to do Rocky 9. So if you open this up, here's all your options. Yeah, feel free to use anything here or generate your own via your VM. Or just use the one that's in the GitHub repo. It's tested to work. All right, here we go. So everything completed. I think I do have to install Git. I don't think I added that in the kickstart file. Anyways, let's go ahead and get this done. Oh, I've messed up. I remember now. Remember, default Rocky. Okay, cool. DNF update. Oh, that's right. Okay. Oh, that's weird. Oh, okay. So network's having fun. Let's actually see. Yeah, okay. So I was setting static leases in my router and I accidentally blew out the DHCP server. So yeah, that's probably what happened there. Everything's reconfiguring. Anyways, we're back. So let's do DNF install git, and I gotta do sudo. Don't ask, just do. Okay. We're almost there. Nice. All right, cool. So let's make a directory development scripts. Actually, I want to do two. We want git and scripts. Okay. Git clone, and we want this repo right here. Okay. Okay, drop in Rocky. Now, at this point, what I do is I would shut the VM off, and I'd hop on over here, and I would take a snapshot. I don't like to take snapshots while everything's running because you're more prone to data corruption, and restoring from data corruption usually doesn't happen easily. So yeah, at this point, that's what I do. Shut it off, take a snapshot, come back. It is a lab, right? Okay, so let's hurry and get this going. Let's do Rocky setup, and it should ask me yes if I'm root. So let's kick this off. Provide domain name for calling redirector. So in the script, you can comment out the self-signed certificate and use let's encrypt. Go that route. Use a signed certificate. Reason being is, well, one, you don't have to worry about self-signed fun stuff, right? When you compromise a host and you set up your beacon or drop your payload or whatever the hell you want to do, Windows especially, PowerShell, right? You're going to have to put in this whole like 10-liner, I can't remember if it's PowerShell or .NET, but you basically have to drop into PowerShell this 10-line piece of code that says ignore self-signed certificates. Make your life a whole lot easier and avoid all that. Just get a signed certificate. So since this is a lab, we're going to do self-signed. If you're in the cloud or publicly exposed internet or firewalled to the internet, port forwarding, sorry. Anyways, if you're doing that, let's encrypt. Okay, so in this case, we're doing self-signed, so we're just going to call this update.reaper-ut.com. And I do have an A record, so yes, okay. And then we need to copy and paste our authorized key. So let me grab that off screen. Actually, you know what? I take that back. Let me show you how to do that. SSH keygen-t RSA. If I could spell -b, and we'll do 4096, and then a -f, and I'm just going to store it home. SSH, please delete me. And I'm not doing a password. cat.sh, please delete me .pub. So there's your .pub, and we only need up to here. I'm actually going to do it all the way up to here. Okay, drop that in. So now what it's doing is, actually we can go over the code. Get C2. Let's do Rocky setup. Oh god, this code is like, you know what, we'll just open it up. Okay, so drop to the bottom. We configured SSH keys, update packages, and we're going to configure the banner. So as you SSH in, you'll get a custom banner. DNF auto update, install SE Linux. I mean, it's all pretty self-explanatory. It's just this line right here. Self-signed, that. That's what you would do, is uncomment this, comment that out. And then the whole thing will reboot. Let's see if we're done yet. Oh, we're almost there. So Nginx was installed. I think, yes, certbot, there it is. Firewall is being updated. Cool. Sign certificate. This part right here. We're going to copy that, and we're just going to throw this into, well, we do it right here, right? PI temp, that. Now, if you're using Powershell Empire, this is super important. Okay, now that's configured, and it's ready to go. So I've already got a lab set up. I'm going to go ahead and just boot that up, and I'll show you how to configure all that. Okay, so here we are. As you can see, we've got our custom banner and then our redirectors. So I'm going to show you a few things. That Rocky setup script, basically what it did is if we go into cat, etc, let's do nginx, conf, and then the domain, right? It's right there. Before we cat that though, I'm just going to run ls, and then what it does is it creates the website directory here. So the website lives there. Nothing there because I don't really care right now. And then back to here. I want to show you the custom rules we got, and I've also got this in the repo. So if we go down to Rocky setup, the script we just ran, it actually has the configuration file saved here, so you can get an idea of what the logic looks like. What we're going to do though is we're going to pull this up. We're going to open that file up. And I want to show something important here. So location, if we hit loginprocess.php or admin.getphp, we're setting off two sets of logic. I believe in this case we're using login, but it's the same thing. We're setting C2 to blank, the variable C2, right? And then it's looking for user agent. And if we get one of these four, it's going to set it to A for me test purposes, LT for long term, ST for short term, and IA for interactive. Long haul, short haul, if just from previous conversations. Then what it does is it comes down here, and if you've set like, maybe your scope is you can only attack these IP addresses and all that fun stuff, right? Then you would put that information up here. Right now I don't give a shit. So what we're doing is we're going through this logic right here. We're setting it to C2 and an additional B. So in this case, C2 equals AB, right? So what's going to happen is it's going to pass that content to localhost port 8082, okay? Now, if you had long-term, short-term, interactive, it would hit a different local port. Why is that important? Well, we want it to hit the local port on one of these. And if the user agent is not set, we have a rewrite rule. Redirect me to Google. Pretty straightforward, right? So what that looks like, pull this up, grab this IP, and if we go to this, you can see default Nginx, right? Now if we go to https update.reaper-at.com, it's gonna say, oh, you've got a self-signed cert. And if we actually look at it, we can go here and you can see junk, right? That's why we use Let's Encrypt. But anyways, let's go forward, and what happens? Oh, google.com. Redirect's working exactly as it's supposed to. Obviously, if you're doing like a phishing campaign or something, maybe you want to redirect it to your company's website or something that's, going to not be so obvious. Okay, cool. So now we got those set up. I want to show you one last thing. We're going to look at the open ports, and you're going to see this 8082. Remember how our redirector pointed to that? We've got something connected to that port. And I will show you what that looks like once I pull up my VM. I've got Kali over here. We're going to go ahead and open up on this screen so you guys take a look. Okay. Can I open that? Oh, yeah, I can. Okay, cool. So anyways, what this looks like is we have this service set up. And if you're curious what that looks like, well, if you go back to that GitHub repo, let's go back to the server. Not the redirectors, we want the server. So in this case, tested on Kali. You're going to copy these files and put them in etc initd, and then this file right here. What this is you have three variables you need to set. You have the first IP for your first redirector, second IP for your second redirector, and then the type of C2 you want to call. So in this case, we're just going to do an interactive because it's a demo, right? If you had three of these going 3 different servers, right? 3 different Kali servers in this case. You'd set one interactive, one to what, long-term and short-term, and I'll show you what those where those variables can be found. Anyways, it would kick off logic and, you know, pull in your SSH key. In this case, it's stop. So in this case, we'd want the redirector, IP, all that, right? Those variables are called from this file, user sbin c2 redirectors. And here's this script. So basically, if we're calling the C2 type interactive SSH, which we are from the previous file, it's going to shoot off this logic, right? Uh-oh. Hopefully we sent that right. Anyways, and then we have short haul and long haul. 8081. Hang on. Oh boy, we'll find out. Yeah. So back to Kali. Okay, go ahead and quit that. Let's just go ahead and exit. So I've got Kali set up, or sorry, Powershell Empire already set up. As you can see, all we did is run this, and it's using default creds, which you don't want to ever do, but lab, who cares? This will be all gone by the time this video posts. So anyways, we have our server, right? And here's our client. We can communicate. So let's go to listeners, client server, right? And we're going to edit it so you can take a look at what I said. Oh shit, there we go. So login process.php, right? And then the default agent would be that 41 dot whatever address. You can always set it to the 0, or sorry, the 1, 2, or 3 that we had set before. Anyways, and here's the host port, and then you can't see it, so we got to go up. There it is, the certificate path. You probably don't need this. Let me explain. We're SSHing over to those redirectors, right? And listening, like we forwarded our port to 8081 or 8082, right? It's encrypted over the network using SSH. It is not encrypted on the host. So if somebody's able to listen to your, or set up a TCP dump, run a packet capture, right? They'll be able to read it in plain text unless you use this signed cert, right? So your best chances, even though it's self-signed, just do it. Encrypt where you can. Don't be lazy, right? Anyways, so yeah, set that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to generate a payload. Listener's all ready to go, as you can see. Where's it at? Right there. Okay. Let's use Stager. And I mean, there's a bunch of these things you can use. We're just going to use the multi-launcher because it's easier. So we're going to set the listener to HTTP. And then we're going to set safe checks always to false. Unless you're doing like a pen test and you have to test for antivirus or EDR or whatever, right? In this case, I don't want to sniff the host for antivirus. Like that's going to give me away and I'm going to get caught. Don't do that. The other thing we need to do is set this user agent. Remember this guy up here? We're going to set the user agent. Okay. One last thing I want to point out. From that Rocky setup script, remember, we saved it in that file. You're going to update your host to, in this case I did that, right? Port 443, and then your default profile, and then I said the user agent on use stager only, that, and then the cert path. That's all you really need. Okay. Now, let's make sure everything is here. Okay. Looks good, so let's generate it. Actually, no. I'm going to run this on Linux just because I don't have my Windows machine booted, and that takes a few because it's a VM. So we're just going to set this to Python. Oh, sorry. Got ahead of myself. Okay, and now let's generate it. So now you've got Python 3 with this big old base64 code. You can set that to different, you can obfuscate commands, all that fun stuff, right? Well, not with Python. You'll have to do a little manual stuff here. So anyways, let's get a Docker container up and running just so you guys can see what that looks like. Actually, you know what? I do want to show you what this looks like to point out a very important thing. This is, so wait, eval, SSH. Okay, we're going to tailf var log nginx access.log. Tails. So good. Okay, sudo. Okay, so we're going to set that. And that was me pinging that, remember. Okay, sudo tail-f var log nginx access.log. Okay, this is important. Okay, now we're going to set up one more, and this is just going to be our Docker container. So we'll do sudo run rmit. Basically, I don't want this container to live forever. As soon as it closes out, it dies forever. We want it interactive, so that way we can have shell access to it. And we're going to do debian latest, and we'll do bash. Okay, God, here we go. Try that again. So let's pull Debian. There's a few things we need to install just to make sure it works as expected. In this case, Python 3. You can see how this is going to set you back if you compromise an older host. For instance, I mean, Windows XP, right? PowerShell is not going to exist. You're going to have a harder time getting that going. You're going to need another C2 that's going to interface with like VB script or something. So anyways, let's move on. We're going to do don't need sudo apt update -y. This should be pretty fast. Okay, apt install python 3 pip just in case. And we need 374 megabytes. This should go somewhat fast. Okay, all that's looking good. Okay. Now, when we drop this payload, you notice that there was an and symbol in there. Shit, let me just pull it up. Basically, it's going to throw it in the background as a job. That's one way of doing it, but we don't want to write to disk, usually. Unless the beacon's like something that's required, you have to write to disk. Put it somewhere safe. Even with this, you can create a file, but usually they blow themselves out, just so they run in memory. Not all the time, it just depends on how you set it up. So let's jump back over here and let's kick off this payload. Does it work? Ooh, can't contain null bytes. Let's see what we are missing. Okay. Jobs. Okay. Let's start here and debug. Echo-n base64-d. Okay, this is fun. So let's run Python 3. Let's make sure we have all of our imports right. So let's see, this exists. It does. Okay, import. Let's keep going down. Wait a minute, sys import SSL. Okay, so I'm back, and I was going to edit all this shit out, but I guess not, because I think troubleshooting is going to be super important here. Also, we're next day, because, yeah, I ran into some stuff. So anyways, let's start with what we're looking at. Again, basically we have our C2, and it has two front-end redirectors that are Rocky, and the inbound traffic will hit Rocky, and the proxy will forward it internally to port 80, whatever we set up, 80, 82, whatever. So let's find out why this shit's not working. So what we're going to do is we're going to tail the Nginx logs. Come on. Okay. We're going to go over a little bit of forensics here, but not much. Okay, so now we've got clean. Okay, cool. Now if we jump over to Kali, I will actually move that over so you can see that. Okay. Okay, so we're going to need this for our user agent. We are HTTPS. We have a certificate path, so our HTTPS traffic will be encrypted. Okay, so let's set up a stager. Oh, damn it. Okay, so we're going to set our listener. We're going to set our language to Python. Let's set our user agent to that. I think that's it. No, save checks. Okay, that should be it. So yeah, we're going to use Python. Our listener is the HTTP. Save checks off, user agent. Okay, so let's generate it. And now we have this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to use my host. We have these set up. You're going to see a smaller terminal here. I'm not too worried about that. Drop it in. Okay, so source code string contains null bytes. Notice that we got a hit right here, and it's saying 302. If this failed, we need to look at the error logs. So instead of access, let's look at error and see what happened. Okay, right off the bat. Upstream 8081. Okay. If I remember correctly, we forwarded over to 8082. How do we check that? Let's go back to the C2. Let's open this up and run a status check. Okay, we can see that we did forward 8082. So somewhere our logic is screwed up. If we go back into these files right here, vi etc, actually, yeah, we're in the configuration file. Somehow we should have set this, right? We should have set that, so A is set, and then we go down to the next logic, because remember we're in login process.php. We set the A, C2 to A, cool. Now we scroll down to this next set of logic, right? So now we set, it would be AB, so AB to that. We should be going port 8080, and we didn't. For whatever reason, we hit 8081. Why that is, I don't know. So, for whatever reason, it thinks we're hitting IAB. Beats the hell out of me. I have no clue why that is. Set C2 blank. The user agent should have been this, right? Is that what we did? I'm not seeing it here. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So for whatever reason, that took forever to register. So we log in process, we hit that as our user agent, but for whatever reason, it hit that one. So now we get to do the whole debugging game. We did set it to an interactive, which should be 8082. So let's open this back up. Interactive. Let's try this one out. Let's see if that changes something. If not, we'll just change our port and you get the idea, but obviously there's a problem with the Nginx configuration. We know that. Okay, so let's go back to PowerShell Empire. Let's pop this guy open. Actually, you know what? I just noticed that port. Sorry, one moment. Let me just make sure I read that correctly. So we're going to set it as IA. And once we do IA, it's going to be set to B, so port 8080. And we should be pointing to 8082. So there's a bug there that needs to be fixed. You know what we could do? We want interactive, okay? And according to this Nginx, we want IAB to be 8081. So let's fix that. We want 8081. Okay. Let's see, what is this? Sudo vi etc. I want to say it's user sbin c2. It is. So we want interactive shell, which is 8081. Okay. So interactive SSH. Okay, we know that's there. SSH-port. I want to say it's in etc. Sudo vi etc. Yeah, it is. Okay. Short haul. We don't want that. We want interactive. Okay. Interactive underscore SSH. Interactive underscore SSH. Cool. We're there. Now we're going to go ahead and stop. Oh yeah, we need to reload. Sorry. We could have written this as a systemd file, but I did initd because I'm confident other people are going to have their C2s running an old version of Linux or the old way of initd versus systemd. So I made it initd because it works forward and backwards. Okay. Okay, now we can do a stop, and then we can do a start. Well, I guess restart. Now let's do a status. We are listening on port 8081. Okay, we know that'll work, right? But I want to take this one step forward, and we're going to edit our listener. And once in a while, as you disable and enable, you're going to screw up Powershell Empire. Just shut it down and restart it. We can see listener was disabled. Okay, cool. Let's update the default profile. We're going to use that one. And then we're just going to use the login process. Okay. Now we're going to enable. And there goes, it fails. Okay, so this is a good example. We're just going to shut off our client, and then we're going to shut off our server. Okay. Start it up again. Give that a few seconds. You'll notice you will not have anything saying listener started because it failed last time we tried to start it. Let's go and kick that off. Assuming everything is correct, we're going to go ahead and look at our listeners. And you can see it's enabled false. Cool. So let's go ahead and edit this guy. And you can see 1.0 whatever. Okay, so let's go ahead and enable starting listener. It's there. Okay, now we're going to use the stager. Let me copy that. Okay. Again, set language Python set listener http set safe checks to false and set user agent to this guy right here. Okay, is everything correct? Sure looks like it, so let's go ahead and generate it. We have our payload, and now we're going to come back to our host. Actually, I want to hurry and do this. Make sure they match. Okay, so in theory, we're doing interactive, so we set this one. Okay, we are under the login process. Okay, the next flow will say, okay, we're going to set B, so it should be IAB 8081. Is this correct here? IA, IAB. So in theory, we should hit local port 8081. Just for good measure, let's restart this because I can't remember. Okay, cool. So now tail access, and kick off this. Okay, so I want you to see something here. Notice how it says get login process.php post. So obviously we have activity. We did not change our jitter, so every 5 seconds this should call back. That's super noisy, and you're gonna get caught if there's no AV, EDR, or whatever, right? So you'll want to think about how you want to change your processes. Maybe you want like 3 different versions, 4 different ones, make it look like, I mean, one of your C2s should be for clients, one should be for servers, on-prem, one should be AWS. Set up profiles to mimic traffic. On a client, maybe you want to use Google or Bing search results. Make it not so obvious, and set your jitter. So what jitter is if we go back into here, if we go to our listener right here, basically what it means is reach back intervals, right? Do you want them to call back every 5 seconds? Do you want them to call back every 30 seconds? Like, sorry, that's your delay. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. But then add a jitter, which will say plus or minus 5, 20, 30 seconds, right? You want to do that so it's not so obvious. As a SOC analyst, if I go back and look at a host's logs or TCP traffic because of a packet dump, right? And you do a search for that host and you just see a callback to this IP or host name every 5 seconds, that's sketchy as shit, right? So be aware of things like that. So this login process, you should add more than just that. And that can go into malleable profiles and all that, but that's another topic. But yes, I would be aware, like if you're going after a WordPress site or something on a Bluehost account, like obviously legality and all that. But what I'm getting at is if you go through that, you're going to, oh God, if you go after something like that, the chances of like being detected is less, but still be aware you don't want to get caught. So you as a red teamer, I'm highly confident if you're hired as a red team engineer, they have decent capabilities with the blue team. Your job is to make sure, can I attack it? Can I get around it if there is something in the way? And can I go undetected? Because your whole point is to get in, right? Stay in and act. Again, I'm going to throw a shout out to this book. More capabilities, right? Look at it. It's great. Okay, so anyways, let's get back to our agent. We kicked off the payload. You can see the stager copied, uploaded, everything it needed. And you can see it's done here. So now let's go to our agent. Okay. You can see my username. Actually, let's just open this up. Okay. And then at this point, you can start using modules. And modules are basically, I guess you could say post-exploitation of what you want to do on the host, whether that's pivot, installing a proxy. If you want to start getting your like situational awareness done, you want to understand what you as a user can do, things like that. So we'll use a module. Let's see, maybe they got a privesc in here. Yeah, they got a few, but we don't want PowerShell, we want Python, Linux. So yeah, you could run stuff like this, set agent that, and just execute it. And we'll let that run, assuming it actually completes and all that. Wow, that was fast. But yeah, as you look at the logging, I mean, look at this. This is like super noisy, and it's obvious. Like, there's our post, because that was coming from our server saying, hey, do this, right? Anyways, super noisy. Let's jump back in over here, see if anything came back. Task, okay, so let's interact. Okay. And then once we interact, then we have more options, right? So you can upload, download, you can set the proxy, look at history. I mean, you could do like, who am I? Right, and then you can even open a shell. But remember, it is HTTPS, whatever. So the shell is not live. It's going to be every time the callback happens. So like if I do a PWD, it's going to wait 5 seconds or whenever the agent calls back, like that. That's hopefully helpful to get your C2s up and running. And again, like I said, it's all done through the redirectors. I would highly recommend getting one just because, or not one, I'd get two, make them a little beefy. Just referring to the earlier part of this video, you want to have that plug and play ability via HTTP or HTTPS. It allows you to, like Powershell Empire is going to work differently than say Caldera or Cobalt Strike. It's worth investing that time to do it right. And then if you want to really go forward, I would recommend setting up infrastructure as code. So you have your deployment files. So let's say you're using Ansible, maybe you're using KVM, maybe you're using AWS. I mean, obviously with AWS, you're going to have just like literally infrastructure as code. So you can spin up your environments and spin them down, and it'll all be stored as code in Git, GitHub, GitLab, whatever you're using. Anyways, hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I think in the next few videos, I'll be focusing more of a maybe purple team or red team engagement with like Ghostwriter and Vector, but we'll get there.